Howdy. Welcome. My name is Jesse,
And I'm Sue.
and we thought it might be fun to let you in on our lives. This is what we do usually every evening or whenever we get the time. We sit down and we talk about everything under the sun. We tend to, just have chats about things that interest us. And today, or rather this week, being a mental health week. Is there such a thing, mental health week?
Yeah, it's Mental Health Month as well. We recently passed Mental Health Day, but the focus of this month is on mental health.
So we thought it might be useful to just use this opportunity to just talk about something very close to our hearts, and that's mental health. And so if you do at any point in time have any questions, just feel free to just let us know. And just type in away, and we'd love to just connect with you. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you face when it comes to mental health? Let me ask you that first.
Well, I think a little bit of a backstory. I do have a history and a long battle with clinical depression. But you don't have to be clinically diagnosed with depression to undergo a mental health challenge. So I would say for myself, some of the challenges would involve trying to get through my day simply, and to go through the routines that I have to, even though I don't even feel like leaving the house or even getting out of bed. And generally there's a sense of difficulty in accomplishing tasks, or feeling like it's difficult to just see the light at the end of the tunnel, or just moments where you don't have the energy to do things because life seems a bit bleak. And it's been challenging, I think, not just for myself but for many people in this time, given that so many of us are battling the same pandemic and the restrictions that come along with it, and the losses of freedoms and roles, and just a sense of instability.
Now, if at any moment I have to just disappear from the screen, please do pardon me, because we have a poor little sick dog that might need our attention every once in a while. So thanks for sharing some of your challenges. I think to only be fair, I will also share some of the challenges that I have faced with regards to mental health from my point of view. And I think mental health for men, it's a subject that's very taboo, not just for men, I think for human beings itself. It's something that we grew up hearing. Mental health, it's usually equated with someone being mad, and it doesn't matter whether you are depressed or not. Mental health is something we don't talk about. Even in Singapore, all we knew about being mad or mental health was the mental asylum that we had called Woodbridge Hospital. And it's sad how it's only been in a couple of years that it's actually changed its name to the Institute of Mental Health. So, that goes to show that, a lot of minds and thoughts really had to change around mental health and how real the problem actually is. Now, mental health is thank you, Tharandi. It's so lovely to hear from you, and it's been such a long time. I hope you've been well. So mental health is, I think, why it's faced such, I think, a challenge like that, a challenge of a reputation of being something that was so taboo in the past. And I think a lot of that really had to do with the fact that because it's something you can't see, it's a disease or it's an ailment that people can't see. It's not a broken hand, it's not a broken leg. Because it's not visible, it doesn't exist. And I think that's where it's sad. It's something that crosses people's minds. It's something we don't think about. And pardon me, I keep getting distracted by our lovely little...
Well, I think I just want to say that in line with what Jesse is saying, that the theme of the mental health month that we have is about destigmatizing what mental illness is. And also there is a clear line and demarcation between mental health and mental illness there are practices that contribute to our mental wellness and mental health, well-being, such as self-care practices that I think with now, I don't need to mention them, but like massage, yoga, exercise, taking time out for yourself. But there is a difference with someone who's suffering from an illness, a mental illness, and I think it's still in Singapore at least, it's synonymous with being mad, as he had said. And it's unfortunate because I think what a lot of people are unaware of is that just as how, for example, someone walking along the street can have diabetes, and you would have no idea that they have it in most cases because it's infecting an internal organ. It's about glucose levels. I would say that the analogy I would draw to that is the brain. Our brain has an imbalance as well. It's not able to regulate the necessary hormones that we need to feel what's normally classified as happy or uplifted, and it's a challenge. And I think what's interesting is that I suppose it's easier for people to accept that their illnesses, unseen illnesses such as cancer or diabetes, because they see the physical results or damage of such diseases, even though it's probably unseen at the start. But with depression, really the only affliction we see in really bad cases is death. Mm-hmm. And I think what's even more unfortunate about that is that a lot of the misinformation around it seems to center around the fact that they could have just thought themselves happy, that they could have stopped thinking about whatever made them sad and just snapped themselves out of it. And again, I have to stress that it is an illness. There is an actual illness with an organ in the body, that's the brain. And it could be triggered by something that's actually hormonal, biological, but it could also be triggered by something purely emotional, something traumatic. And I invite people to think about the fact that, if you think about how hard it is to change habits, mm-hmm. just our habits, we have routines or things that we like. And if it's so hard to change that, imagine how much harder it must be for someone to be told to change how they think, especially if it's not something that they have chosen to do it for themselves. So I think that there's a lot to discuss around mental illness. And certainly there's a lot of overlay with mental wellness, but I just have to draw that distinction.
I think that's a very good point. This having that distinction between the two. Because usually we tend to talk about either one, and there is no sense of actually bringing the two on a spectrum, so to speak. And I think it's by not doing that all this time, I think what we do is we segregate, people who really need help, people who have mental illness, and on the other hand, we have everyone else who's stressed. But it is a spectrum. It is pain that is as real as anything else that people feel, regardless of where they are on that spectrum.
Yes.
And
I think it's also important to note that Singapore's suicide rate has gone up exponentially. So I just wanted to say hi to Harris in Munich. I hope you are well. Much love. Thank you to everyone else who's joined us as well. Hello, Grishma. So nice to see you after so long. Yes, I think I'd like to just highlight that the rate of suicide in Singapore has gone up, and no guesses as to why. And also, a large proportion of the suicides are committed by men. I think a lot of people may not be aware of the fact that men actually are more prone to committing suicide than many of us would actually anticipate. And that's again because of the taboos around how men should express, or shouldn't rather express, their emotions.
And I think we've talked about this before, that sometimes it's very useful to look at things from a gendered brain perspective. Because I can give you my example as a man, or as being someone who's got a very male-gendered brain. I like to get things done. I like to find solutions. I like to rescue. I like to achieve. And sometimes when I'm in a position where there are things that I just can't do, I feel very lost. And I think it's useful to point that out.
Yes, and I think one of the most important things I would like to share, spread awareness around beyond mental illness, is actually the science of emotions. Mm-hmm. Now there's a whole lot of science behind it that I can't really go into, and I won't, it will bore you, but I think it's very important for me to draw attention to the fact that emotions have a very real scientific basis to them. They are not fluff, and they are distinct from feelings. I know this might confuse some people, but feeling something a certain way about something is not necessarily the same as having an emotion. There was a very popular cartoon that was based on science called Inside Out that explored the emotions. And just very quickly, all human beings are born with and experience 7 emotions in identical ways, physiologically, chemically, and scientifically. And I think the 2 most destructive emotions, or rather emotions that cause a lot of turmoils in our life, would be depression, well, anger and sadness. And with sadness, it's often one of the hardest ones to come out of. And I just want to say that every emotion serves a purpose. I think a lot of people have heard about the fight or flight response, in fear, even in anger. It's protective. When we feel the emotion of fear, of anger, we either flee or we fight or we freeze in an attempt to protect our lives, literally. Now, a lot of people, I think, are aware of that, but not so much aware of what the function of sadness is. It's really interesting, but if you really think about it, when someone is sad and they express that sorrow, it's to achieve one of 2 things, and they're not even really aware of it. The first is, it's literally a call for support. It could be that they need some form of support, some benevolent witnesses, someone to just stand by them in moments of deep sadness, grief, or sorrow. And in the other instance, it might mean that they need some time alone, just to recalibrate, to find some time, take some time out.
And just going on to that, I think it's so important for us. Everyone talks about how it's so useful to talk to someone. It's true, it is very useful. And of course, if you are depressed, it's very useful to get professional help as well. I also want to point out that sometimes, hello darling.
Sorry.
I also want to point out that sometimes it's very useful for us to check in with our loved ones, close friends, people we haven't seen in quite a while, and to, when we make that connection with that person, when we ask them, how are you, to take a moment when you ask that question, because by taking a moment, what we're doing is we are stopping ourselves from asking a question we might have asked thousands of times before, and we are trying to bring a bit of presence into that moment. So ask someone, the next time you meet them, or if you haven't caught up with them for a while, how are you? And just by asking the question a little bit differently, you appeal to a different part of the other person who will feel a little bit safer in giving you a different answer. Sometimes the answer could just be, I'm good, and that could be it. But you never know when a compassionate ask of that question could actually make a difference to someone's life. Because, life is difficult. Anyone who said, oh, life is easy, has probably seen only one part of life. It's difficult. We all have challenges. We have challenges with our families, with our businesses, with our loved ones, and also challenges internally. And I think that's sometimes one of the biggest challenges that we might have and not be able to talk about. Because imagine, we have such a good relationship as husband and wife, as business partners, as best friends. Now imagine if I feel like I can't even talk to her, and sometimes I don't want to burden her with something that's going on in my mind. What are my options? My options is I can call a friend. But how often do we do that? How often do we actually pick up the phone and speak to a friend? If we can do that now, a little bit more often, it's going to be a shock to the system when you get a call. But after that initial shock, it's going to be a little bit heartwarming because somebody took the time to actually check in on you. And sometimes that can make the difference between feeling completely overwhelmed and feeling okay. So reach out to someone you haven't spoken to in a while, someone who you feel could do with some warmth. And you never know, it could liven someone else's day. And I feel it's a little bit like a smile. I always tell people that I work with, or even friends, it's so important for us to bring a smile into an interaction, or even to smile to a stranger. Because a smile does two things. One is it sends that ray of warmth and positivity to the other person who is on the receiving end. But the other thing that it actually does, and in case that other person doesn't really react to that smile, the other thing that it does is it tells our body, if I'm smiling, that everything's okay, or that I am in a slightly better space. And that's really the power of a smile. It's almost bi-directional. You know, sometimes people say, well, I can only smile if I'm happy. Well, try smiling anyway, because if you smile enough, it could make you feel a little bit differently about your day. So that's something I thought could be useful.
And on the other end, if you happen to have someone who reaches out to you, who is feeling down and they've expressed that, you know, they're not having the best week or day, how you could support that friend is by being a compassionate listener. And there is an art and a skill to listening. I think a lot of us, with the best of interest, we listen to respond. We listen and we hear them, but we really want to just say, you know what, everything's going to be okay, you'll get through this, you just have to think positive. And I understand that that's coming from a place of trying to help. But in most situations, there are times where they've heard it so much that it could either make them feel worse, or it might make them feel like you're not truly understanding. And it also has a tendency to minimize the troubles that they're going through, even though that may not be what you want to do. So sometimes the best thing to help someone get through a bad time is to simply listen. And just acknowledge that they're being hurt by nodding your head or saying, wow, that's really bad, by validating their experience. And it's okay to say, look, I'm here if you ever need me, and I hope things get better. I sure wish things get better, I hope things get better. But sometimes mouthing platitudes can do worse. And I think the whole idea of mental wellness and all that, it's been become very popular in the last 2 years because of COVID. And I do think that now we are becoming a lot more well-versed with the challenges that come around it. But I think what hasn't been talked about enough is the fact that there are times when things actually don't happen for a reason. Things happen because they happen. And there are times where it's very hard to promise someone that things will get better because, you know, given how things are, we really don't know. So the best way to truly be compassionately present for someone is to just listen to what they have to say, and to echo what they're saying about how tough their situation is, and to say, yes, I can imagine. And if you haven't been in that situation, you don't have to pretend. You can just say, well, it really sounds difficult. And to just ask how you can support them and what's the best thing you can do for them.
So I think what we can invite you to do tonight, it is 10:35 in Singapore. What I invite you to do is this, a little experiment. If you're not going to be sleeping soon, or whenever you do this next, it doesn't really matter. I invite you to become a better listener. And what I mean by that is, the next time, let's say your loved one or your colleague is speaking to you, I want you to just try to listen. Listen not just with your ears, but with your eyes and with your entire body. And what that means is this. A lot of times, like Sunita mentioned, when we listen, we are listening to respond. For example, if somebody's telling me what a terrible day they've had, in my mind, I'm thinking about how can I solve this? Maybe I can give them a suggestion, a solution. Try doing things a little bit differently. Simply just be there and listen. And I don't mean listen like this. Relax your body and just be there. Open yourself up to that experience right now, like this, whenever you are doing it, and allow yourself to look into the eyes of the other person and allow the words to not just come into you through your ears, but allow that emotion or whatever it is they're feeling actually come in. Now, it might be difficult for you to do initially, to hold this active listening period for a very extended period of time. But if you actually try and practice, it's a skill that becomes better. It's a bit like riding a bicycle or skateboarding. Practice this, and you would actually find a bit of difference in your relationships. And in fact, what starts to happen is that the other party on the receiving end of this listening with presence, they're actually going to feel heard. Try this.
Yes. It's called holding space. And holding space is just exactly that. Space is empty. You don't have to do anything. You just have to be present, hear what they're saying. And if they ask a specific question and ask for opinion, feel free to share in a very kind and non-judgmental way what you think could help them. And I also invite you, if you are someone who is struggling right now, with feeling really low or anxiety, listen to yourself. And if you feel like you don't feel safe sharing your issues with anyone, a great way to find something to hold space for you is to also journal and to write about how you're feeling, because there is a part of your brain, the rational part of your brain, that will help you disengage from the sheer weight of the emotions that are held in a different part of the brain that often hijack us emotionally. Journaling has been proven to help people work through very difficult emotions as well. But I will say it's a tool, and if you are really struggling, like truly struggling, where you can't even get out of bed and you've been having dark thoughts, I highly urge you to seek help. And there is no shame in that. I think we are the most resourced in this period of time to be able to get the help that we need. And if you are feeling a bit hesitant, just know that you can go through a few options until you find one that suits you. But there are many resources. And the worst that could happen is you can hang up. Or, if you don't feel comfortable. But just try something different. And if one way doesn't work, there are many other ways. There are many approaches to mental illnesses. I just have to say that. Some people take a Panadol for a headache. Some rub a Tiger Balm.
Some drink a lot of water.
And it's the same way with medical alternatives for mental issues. There's therapy, there's psychiatry, there's psychology, there are holistic means there's changing your diet. And I mean, there's a whole lot of literature around it, but you don't have to feel like, I don't want to go to the hospital and be branded a mad person. There are always going to be people who are going to judge, But what's at stake is your life, the quality of well-being, the people who love you. And I'm saying this as someone who has battled depression, and I still go through it. And I'm just saying that there are people who won't understand, and we just have to accept that. And if they happen to be family members, as much as they may not understand it, they will tend to try to stick through it with you. And if they don't, just know it's because they're afraid of what they don't understand.
And I think the biggest takeaway for me from that was, don't stop trying. Keep trying. And if something doesn't work, try something else. If speaking to one therapist didn't work out for you, it doesn't mean all therapists are bad. It means maybe that one wasn't good for you. Try another therapist. If that doesn't work, try a psychologist. Try a psychiatrist. Keep trying. Even if it's the same modality, try something different until you find something that makes a difference, because there's always going to be a way out.
Yeah.
And just know it. We've both individually and I think collectively been through the dark, long journey through hell, mental health, psychological health, and we've come out. And I think only having come out of that dark cave, I think it gives us that sense of being able to share with you that it is possible to come out. Just keep trying. Reach out to us, reach out to friends, and sometimes if you feel like you can't reach out to friends, reach out to strangers, because sometimes strangers would react to us like a benevolent witness, and sometimes that's all we need.
I just want to say hello to President Chong. Hello.
Hello. And hello to everyone else who logged in live. It was fun doing this, and thank you, my dear.
Yes.
And it's time for us to feed our lovely little Trixie. Thank you, and fight hard, keep fighting, and stay safe.
Yes, and I think the last thing I just want to say is, you know how illnesses have the worst things about them? For example, for me, the flu, the worst thing about it are the body aches and the lethargy. And it makes me feel like I'm never going to get out of it and I can't move, but after a few days I can. I want to say that for me, ostensibly, the worst thing about depression is that it makes us believe that things are never going to get better, that things are going to get worse, and there is no conceivable way that things will improve. So that's part of how insidious it is, and that's part of the illness. But I'm here to say that because it's part of what makes us believe is not solvable, so to speak, it actually is, because it's just part of that illness. And the only way to overcome it is to keep going. If you are at your wit's end and you're on your last straw, I invite you to just try one more option that you haven't already. And if there isn't one, create one. And that's what I've done for myself. You create lifelines of any sort. And Trixie, she's been my lifeline as well. But yes, I just wanted to say that just remember that thoughts are not facts. There's many times I've thought that nothing will get better, and I thought it was a fact, but it wasn't. It was a thought distortion that comes as part of depression, for example. So,
and I think this is where it's really useful, even for me, hearing what Sunita has just shared. I think keep this in mind. As long as you hear that voice or that feeling that says to you in absolute terms, with the words never, ever, things are never going to change, you're never going to get better, things are only going to get worse. Whenever there are these kind of absolutes, it is the dark side that's talking to you. It is not you. It is that other side, that shadow side, that's trying to take control. And whenever that happens, I want you to know that it is a voice that you can get rid of. It is something that you can overcome. That's just how life is. There is always a way. And whenever you are made or conned into thinking that there's no way, it's like fake news. Do not believe it.
And I just want to thank Grishma for giving us such kind and validating comments and words. It's really deeply appreciated. Yes. And just, again, to add on to Jessie's thing, an interesting tidbit is, I think that's how I want to leave the conversation today, is they actually found, and this is true for Singapore, I'm not sure if this is true for other parts of the world, but it's worth considering. They actually found that a lot of the reasons there was an increase of people who are having depression was due to a lack of sufficient vitamin D. And I think it's correlated to the fact that a lot of us have been staying indoors a lot more and working from home because of the pandemic. So I would encourage you, if the next time you have a check with your doctors, to see if you might need some vitamin D, because that's one of the easiest way to boost the happiness hormone that we might be missing in with the sun. But yes, if you feel that this was useful and you'd like more information, do drop us a comment or a message, and we will be more than happy to do more of these live talks. And yes, on that note, we hope you have a lovely weekend ahead of you.
And go well into the night.
Yes.
We'll see you during the day again.
Take
There's
care.
always going to be a day.
Well, have a good week. Well, night.
Take care.
Take care. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.